Season 7 of The Dragon Prince, possibly and likely, I would say, the final season of the show, ends with the tragedy of Aaravos, I would say, completely incapable of moving past vengeance and resentment. He, in a way, betrayed his two daughters. He betrayed his biological daughter, Leola, who was a rather cheery and fun-loving little kid. At the conclusion of this season, we see her last wish, which is a world where no child has to know suffering and sorrow. It's a bit treacly, I would say, but it does have purpose and significance. It reminds one that she would not have approved of any of this. Aaravos' bitter creedcore against a cruel and callous world, even if it is done in the spirit of love for her, and he does genuinely deeply love her. The way he expresses that love is through bitterness and resentment, through this passion for revenge that only causes more suffering to himself and others. This is a familiar idea in the show because it is exactly what the show did with Viren. I think the show handled it a bit better with Viren, honestly. There is a reason he is my favorite character in this show. Thinking about it after 7 seasons. Because he is just so painfully human. He's passionate and committed and ambitious. He's very thoughtful. He's great at concocting schemes and plans, and his motives are understandable. He believes that humanity has been mistreated. He believes that he himself and those he loves have been mistreated, and he wants some sense of justice. He only becomes so desperately committed to that justice in whatever cruel form it might take, that his spirit eventually becomes warped by this resentment, this monomaniac, one-sided commitment to achieving his goals at all costs. That is fanaticism. That is what fanaticism is always, regardless of what the beliefs in question are. Sometimes they're justifiable in of themselves, or at least understandable, but when you believe that anything done to advance those beliefs is automatically a good thing, regardless of all the other interests and factors you're neglecting, regardless of the consequences of so dogmatically pursuing a set of ideals, yes, that is fanaticism. And that's what happens to Aaravos as well. Even though he does not seem as messily, brilliantly, tragically human as Viren, his character is not quite as fleshed out, but the emotional resonance is there nonetheless. He fails Leola, and he also fails Claudia. He says that he views Claudia as a daughter as well. He says that he sees her as being very similar to Leola. Now, to a certain extent, you could say that he is the manipulator. He loves manipulating people, and he does to a certain extent. But this strikes me as being very sincere, for better or for worse. Aaravos' love of Leola is genuine. He also seems to sincerely love Claudia in much the same way. But to a certain extent, so what? Viren also very genuinely loved Claudia. He genuinely wanted to do what he believed was right for his family, and he ultimately realized that those ambitions were futile. That yes, the world is cruel and unjust sometimes. And there's no need to be happy about it, or to try to be content with everything, but attempting to bend the world to one's own will in order to remake it in one's own idea of what is fair and just is inevitably subject to one's own personal biases, one's own limitations, one's own fanaticism, and that is what happens to Viren. So I think, to a certain extent, Aaravos being unable to let go of that fanaticism, let go of that one-sided desire for vengeance, is justified to an extent. I personally am not that unhappy to see the dragons die. The dragons do seem kind of cruel and callous. And I think the show would have done a little better if it had at least demonstrated that Aaravos' feelings do come from somewhere. That, considering what the dragons have done to him, considering what this grand cosmic order has done to him, his nihilism to destroy it is not justifiable necessarily, but there's a real earnestness to his passions and to his desires. And I think the show could have demonstrated that a little more in the final battle. There is a way to have a triumphant final battle without it seeming too simple, to, good guys saving the day. I think what Avatar does with the defeat of Azula, or even what The Legend of Korra does in Season 4 with the defeat of someone like Kuvira, could have served as an example. Those are fights that needed to be done, but at the same time, it would have been nice to see our heroes extend a little bit of understanding to the villain. Callum would have been a great person to do that with, but the show doesn't really develop his relationship with Aaravos as much as it keeps implying it will. Perhaps that will change if we get these several more seasons of the show that the creators have been saying we might get. Who knows? Arthur Schopenhauer talks very thoughtfully about this will being fundamentally tied to suffering and sorrow. That human existence in the world is inevitably bound to these desires. Some of these desires are nakedly amoral, such as the desire for mere wealth or celebrity, but some of them are the desires for things that a good and reasonable person cares about, a desire for the universe to be just, a desire to protect those one loves. But these desires are ultimately frustrated by the world. They are ultimately, inevitably going to be dissatisfied. And so this desire that erupts at the heart of so many people inevitably leads to suffering. There is something very Buddhist in this. And the release, to a certain extent, is the understanding that these sorrows that one goes through are not simply individual. We are not these atomized, little, isolated creatures. We're all united in our sorrows and our laments. We can't simply see ourselves as opposed to others, even others that we fundamentally disagree with, because our human destinies, the sorrows and laments that we face, are all so similar. It's not just a matter of thinking that, oh, we are all one, but really feeling that and understanding that and experiencing the world like that. That's what Schopenhauer talks about. Viren comes to a certain kind of understanding like that by the end of Season 5, especially Season 6. Perhaps Aaravos might too if we get those extra seasons, who knows. I must say I'm not necessarily the most satisfied with the way Season 7 ended. I think it is a blatant ploy to entice Netflix to give the show 3 more seasons. And I'm not personally satisfied with that. The show could have wrapped everything up in 7 seasons. Sure, 9-episode seasons are short, but 7 seasons worth of those 9-episode seasons is 63. 63 episodes. That's longer than Avatar. That's significantly longer than The Legend of Korra. That's much longer than something like Gravity Falls. It's longer than even something like Amphibia. It's comparable in length and total runtime to something like Steven Universe. The show could have wrapped things up very decisively in 7 seasons, but it chose not to. So much of this show was rather sluggish in the back half. The pacing was rather lackadaisical. Even looking back at this final season, season 7, it doesn't really feel like as much is resolved as it really should have. Like, what really of substance happened this season? Aaravos is gone, but the show indicates that it won't be forever. And Kareem's dead, which I'm happy about. Even if his death was a little cartoonish. Ezran got some nice moments this season, but overall, I'm really at a loss of what really of genuine meaning and substance happened this season. Perhaps that's emblematized by a moment at the end of the season when Callum takes Rayla out to this little bridge by the water, and it's all romantic. And it honestly seems like he might propose to her. That would be fitting and appropriate. But he doesn't. Instead, it's just a little goofy surprise. That's my problems with some of these last seasons of the show in a nutshell. There's a lot of potential, a lot of things that are set up, but the show just meanders. It prefers to delay things. You absolutely could have given a satisfying resolution for Season 7 and then left a few doors open for the show to continue. The Avatar comparisons are inevitable, so think about Zuko's mom. That's a door that is left open for the show, and it was continued in comics. There's no reason why the show couldn't have left a few little surprises while still wrapping up a lot of the big conflicts. Instead, it doesn't really seem like it does that. And if anything, it unravels some things that it seems settled, like the death of King Harrow, which is a very important plot point in this show. It fundamentally shapes the psychologies of so many of these characters, and it's just wiped away. With the rationale that, oh, he was in the bird the whole time. Yes, I know it's a fan theory a lot of people have had. I still don't like it. I think it completely undercuts a lot of the drama in this season, especially with Runan. A lot of the Runan stuff this season was actually quite good, but it was really undercut at the end. But yes, I do like what they did with Aaravos. I do think that thematically his character feels complete now. There is a deep sense of tragedy in what happened to him, in his refusal to let go of that vengeance, and I think the show mostly handles that very well. So thank you all for watching. If you liked what you saw today, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Donate to my Patreon if you can and you want to see more videos just like this one before anyone else. Keep watching The Dragon Prince. What do you think about this season? Sound off in the comments. I suppose I just don't like being promised that something will be a conclusion and then it's just not a conclusion. It's just a push to get renewed for 3 more seasons. The show, honestly, shouldn't be greedy. It could have wrapped things up. It really could have. It could have done a very good job. And it did do a good job in some things. I'm just left a little dissatisfied. But Aaravos and Viren stories are handled very well. So anyway, tune in soon for the next analysis. We'll be coming soon. Promise you that. Thank you all again. Adios, comrades.